Well, hey there, listeners. Welcome to the Brand Marketing Show. Kath Langman here. This week's episode is going to be a little bit more of a personal one than usual, and but for a reason. So, I want to tell you a story of my own, really the genesis of my own entrepreneurial career, I guess. And it's about a single comment that became what I can only describe as a sliding doors moment, if you remember that movie from many years ago, or even just the analogy, of course. And the reality is, it was the kind of small, almost throwaway comment that ultimately, in hindsight, you see that it quietly split your future into what could have been two completely different paths. And I wanted to share this today because I suspect a version of the same kind of sliding doors decision moment might be sitting in front of a lot of you right now, even if your scenario looks nothing like mine did, which I'm sure it doesn't, for reasons you'll understand as we get into it. So, to begin with, I want to take you back 21 years. Because 21 years ago, almost exactly, and I am deliberately choosing not to think about that time frame too closely, I finished up at my corporate job. I was heavily pregnant at the time with my eldest son, who is himself about to turn 21. And no, before you do that arithmetic, I am definitely not that old. We are going to just move swiftly on. I actually loved that job at the time. It was a really funky digital design and advertising agency. It was in Sydney's inner west in this really cool three-story space that had been converted from an old chocolate factory. It had exposed brick. It had beautiful old wooden beams. And if you looked closely enough, you could still see flecks of paint on the floor, marking the spots where the chocolate packaging printing presses used to stand. It was a genuinely fabulous creative space. It was the kind of place that makes you just feel a little bit more creative just by walking into it, which was entirely the point. And I fully expected to take my maternity leave and to stroll straight back into that job. But life, as it tends to, has other plans. And before my maternity leave was even done, I found myself pregnant again with my second son. And here is where the era does kind of matter. And that, because, 21 years ago, the Australian workplace legislation was a very different beast than what it is now. And my boss at the time was, in his own words, disinclined to offer part-time work or even a work from home for some of the time option. So I didn't resign in the kind of empowered, choose your own adventure sense of the word. I resigned because I felt like I had no real choice. Now, back then, at that moment in time, we weren't financially struggling exactly, but with my income gone and a second baby on the way, we weren't exactly flush either. And I remember this stretch of time quite vividly, maybe because I wasn't yet as sleep deprived as I was about to become with the second bub. But anyway, spending hours every single week driving between different supermarkets and fresh food markets and, all the different options, trying to get the groceries a little bit cheaper here and a little bit cheaper there. And it was just exhausting. It was like this kind of low grade, relentless effort that doesn't look like much from the outside, but it just quietly wears you right down. And if any of you listeners, and as I'm sure many of you do, live in Sydney, you'll know just even the traffic element of that battle would have been pretty wearing. And then at the time, I came across a really clever invention, a modern cloth nappy diaper, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. And it was designed to function, it was shaped and designed to function like a disposable, so really easy on, easy off. It was made with really innovative fabrics. It made the whole thing really practical and easy to use and wash. And it's, nothing like the bucket of soaking Terry squares situation that my mother's generation would remember. And something clicked, and I decided to start a business, partly to bring in a bit more money, which we definitely needed, um, partly because my creative brain was going quietly feral at home and I really needed something to sink my brain into. And partly, and this I think is the bit that probably matters the most, because I could see the market opportunity really clearly. My own need to live more frugally at that stage of life was shared by almost every other parent or parent to be that I knew. And, like probably everyone, I was going through that stage of life at the same time as all of my friends. Anyway, so if I was driving across 3 suburbs to save a few dollars on the weekly shop, so was a large proportion of other people, and I was fairly sure the market was there for this product. And I was, of course, fairly quickly proven right. That business was called Cushie Tushies. And when I was finally ready to launch my first website, and oh my goodness, in hindsight, it was a truly dreadful little DIY effort, but we all start somewhere. And so when I was ready to launch, I did what every new founder does. I told everyone. I told friends, I told family, I told anyone who would stand still long enough, all in the hopes that they might at least share it with their network, if not buy something for themselves. And it was around then that I got the comment from my old boss, the one from the design agency, based in the old chocolate factory. And he said, "You will never be successful while working from home." And at the time, it landed in two completely opposite ways at the same time. And the first way was that it genuinely rattled me. Back then, working from home, and I mean, running a real business from your kitchen table, it was far less common and far less respected 21 years ago than it is today, post COVID. And there was no Instagram full of founders in beautiful home offices. Well, there was no Instagram at all. There was no normalized working from anything and so when someone I respected, someone from the professional world that I'd just left, told me that I would never make it from home, a big part of me got nervous and wondered if he might be right. But the second way it landed was kind of like a red rag to a bull. Something in me went, "Watch me." And, I've never been in my life more motivated to prove a person wrong. Although, if I think about it, I mean, that is kind of my personality. It's probably not quite true. I can think of one other time when I've been this motivated to prove someone wrong, because when I was 18, I moved out of home and my dad told me that he didn't think I would last and that he reckoned he would see me moving back home within 3 weeks. And of course, I didn't move home. Anyway, but what I think is something in me had already learned even then that the surest way to guarantee I will do a thing is to tell me that I can't. And I'm sure I'm not the only person like that, right? Anyway, the comment and what I decided to do with it ended up being this sliding doors moment for me. It wasn't the pregnancy, it wasn't the job resignation. It was this comment, because there were two paths there. And one path was where I let that comment confirm every nervous doubt that I already had, quietly, wound things down and went back to looking for a proper job, in inverted commas. And the other path where I used it as fuel and backed myself completely. Obviously, I took the second path, right? And here is where I could very easily turn this into just a tidy little motivational story. Doubter says you can't, you ignore the doubter, you back yourself, you win, roll the credits. But that would be totally dishonest, because backing myself was not actually the whole reason it worked. And the real reason is, I think, probably a lot more useful to you than the motivational pep talk version. The truth is, there were three things that made Cushie Tushies work, and only one of them was my personal determination. The first, of course, was that I had proof the model could work, because I actually grew up watching my mum run her professional piano teaching and accompaniment business from home. And that was the example I grew up with through my entire childhood. So when my old boss told me you can't be successful working from home, I had, 15, 20 odd years of lived experience and evidence sitting in my own memory that said otherwise. I'd watched it done, and that belief wasn't just blind optimism, it was pattern recognition. The second reason, though, was that my career in advertising and digital marketing had given me a genuine professional skill set. And so I knew how to market something. I understood positioning and messaging and how to make people actually care about a product. I wasn't learning marketing from scratch while simultaneously trying to do everything else to bring my business to life. I brought that real expertise to the table from day one. And then the third thing that I think, and these three things, mind you, are outside of the fact that there was actually a genuine opportunity and market demand for this product. Like that has to be step number one, of course. But the third thing that I believe made me successful was that I had access to mentorship, because my uncle and husband were both in business and they could guide me on the operational side. The bits that I didn't know yet because I'd never run a business, things like cash flow, logistics, structural decisions or strategic decisions that quietly sink a lot of promising young businesses. So when I hit something I didn't understand, I had experienced people to ask, and they were good people with a lot of experience. So yes, I backed myself, but I backed myself while standing on a foundation of proof, expertise, and mentorship. And I think if you took any one of those three away, the story would probably have ended very differently. A little bit like, a three-legged stool. If you took one leg away, it's going to fall over. And, if I'm honest about it, I was really lucky to have all three. And I want to say something here clearly because I believe it absolutely. No great business is ever built alone. None of us is good enough at everything, as much as we might like to kid ourselves or, you know, exclaim to people around us. None of us have enough hours in the day to do everything well, let alone at scale on our own. And the founders, I think, who pretend otherwise, they're either not telling you the whole story or they're heading for a big fat brick wall that they can't see yet. Now, I sold that first business of mine back in 2014. Sadly, the owners who came after me drove it into the ground, which was such a hard thing to watch. But I will tell you what I do feel genuinely good about, and that's that by the time that I left that business and left that product category, really, a whole wave of other brands had entered the market behind me. And, the product innovation, that practical modern cloth nappy, it went on to become quite mainstream. And I get to feel like I helped pave the way for that. You don't always get to choose how your business ends, but you do sometimes get to look back and see that you moved something forward. And that's a really good feeling, and one that I would never have had if I believed my old boss and never started at all. And so this story now, I want to bring this to you listening to today because I promised you a decision that's probably sitting in front of you right now. And, let's deal with my old boss because he's earned it. He was wrong, fairly spectacularly, demonstrably wrong about working from home. We all know that now. But, which it's such a completely normal thing now. And the idea of it being a barrier to success sounds almost quaint. If he could see the number of extraordinary businesses being run from kitchen tables and spare rooms across Australia right now, and broader than that, he'd have to eat his words with a very large spoon. Actually, if I'm in a generous mood, and I am today, I can see where his comment came from. And I think, because this was a man who'd built his entire career and that gorgeous three-story creative temple of a workspace on the belief that environment matters, that you do your best work surrounded by the right space, the right people, the right energy. From inside his worldview, the idea of building something serious from a kitchen table with a newborn on your hip and a toddler underfoot probably did look impossible. I mean, he was a self-declared bachelor. I don't think he was being cruel. He was being a product of his time and his world and his life experience. And he just also, as it turns out, to be completely, utterly wrong. Because here's the thing, he was wrong about the location and he was accidentally, clumsily circling something that was actually true. You cannot build a successful business in a vacuum. the thing that determines whether you make it was never really where you physically sit. It was whether you have knowledge and genuine support around you while you do it. And I had that. I had the expertise from my advertising career. I had the mentorship from people who'd done it before. And that is the real reason the working from home thing was never going to stop me. This is where I want you to be really honest with yourself as well, because most of the premium brand founders that I speak to have determination and creativity and innovation in spades. They have the product, they have the work ethic that would, quite frankly, frighten my old boss. What a lot of them don't have, and not really through any fault of their own, is the marketing expertise that I happen to bring from my previous advertising career or the strategic mentorship that I happened to get for free from my family members. And, these brand founders are trying to do exactly what I did 21 years ago, backing themselves, building something real, working unbelievably hard, but they're trying to do it without the two ingredients beyond grit that actually made mine work. And then they wonder why it feels so much harder than it should, why they're stuck on the treadmill we talked about a few weeks ago, why they're wearing every single hat in the business, and why they're working harder than they ever did in their old job for a lot less income. It's not because they aren't determined enough. It's because determination was never supposed to be the whole equation. So here's your sliding doors moment. It's probably a bit quieter than mine was because nobody is going to hand you a rude comment to push against. And, that's potentially almost a bit of a problem because no one's going to force this decision on you. And you can avoid making a decision about it for years. But it's there all the same, and it is this. One path, you keep going exactly as you are, working harder, grinding it out, wearing every hat or nearly every hat, running on the treadmill while the platforms you're using just keep changing the rules underneath you, hoping that your determination eventually tips it over in your favor. And for some people, that definitely works. But it is the hardest possible version of the journey, and it has the highest casualty rate. The other part, the other path, or the other option is where you get to have the thing that I was lucky enough to have, the expertise and the strategic support that turns your determination into actual compounding success. The marketing knowledge that you might never have trained in, the experienced person to ask when you hit something you don't understand, the mentorship on the strategic decisions that quietly determined, whether a good business becomes a great one or whether it just stalls. The second path is never an admission that you're not good enough to do it all. I think, the opposite. It's the recognition that no great business is ever built alone, and that the most successful founders are the ones who heroically hid everything or did everything themselves. They're the ones who were clear-eyed about what they were brilliant at and honest about what they weren't, and smart enough to get the right people around them for the rest. My old boss thought success was about where you worked, and he was wrong. It was never about the office. It was about who and what you had around you while you built the thing. And you get to choose that. No one's going to force your hand. You get to decide. You're the boss of yourself and the boss of your business. You get to decide whether you keep doing this the hard way or whether you finally get the support that your determination has been waiting for all this time. It really is a small decision. It probably won't feel very dramatic, but like all sliding doors moments, it can split your future. Now, obviously here at Productpreneur Marketing and, what I talk about here on the brand growth, the brand marketing show, we're not for everyone. We work specifically with premium brand founders, generally in Australia and New Zealand, but also from elsewhere around the world. So we're not for everyone, but we do offer a brand growth strategy session for that kind of a brand, and it's free. You can have an honest conversation with me about where you're at and where the real strategic leverage is, and getting, I guess, some help working out where your biggest gap is to plug right now and what might move you more quickly towards your ultimate vision and bringing that to life. So you can go to productpreneurmarketing.com if you would like to book that in. And, if you are that kind of a brand and you're looking for some help, I would love to chat to you. Summing up today, and I hope you didn't mind me and indulging me sharing a little bit of a story from my past, because 21 years ago someone told me I would never be successful working from home. I'm recording this. I'm still in my home office. I've built and sold one business. I've built two more businesses since then that I still own and run, and I've helped grow a great many others for many of you listeners as well. So make of that what you will. Hope you've enjoyed this particular episode. A little bit shorter than last week's, which might be a blessing for some of you because last week's was a bit of a long one. Thank you for listening as always, and I look forward to being back in your ears again this time next week. Bye for now.